Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Career Development Series webinar, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Staying the course in your legal practice in the face of odds and obstacles. The Career Development Series is a monthly webinar series that contains practical tips on job search and professional development issues for seasoned and newer attorneys alike. This series is brought to you by the ABA Career Center. The ABA Career Center offers career development resources and a job board where you can upload your resume for employers to search and create job alerts based on your search preferences. All this and more is available at ambar/careers. We're thrilled to have our speaker today, Desiree Moore. Desiree is a partner at the law firm of K&L Gates. She's a litigator and the co-founder of the firm's Digital Crisis Planning and Response Practice Group, which helps clients plan for and manage any digital crisis, including data breach, online defamation, harassment, or infringement, and other web and online related issues. She's in her firm's professional development partner. She spends time developing and implementing creative programming for attorneys in the firm, and is the author of Thrive, a new lawyer's guide to law firm practice, published by the American Bar Association in 2012. Desiree, we're going to hand things over to you now.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I love the idea of this program, which the ABA actually brought to me, and I think it's a great opportunity to think about some really pressing and challenging issues that we face as law firm attorneys, for one, but as attorneys more generally. So again, I'm pleased to be here and pleased that this topic and this concept was brought to me to build out and hopefully to help our listeners today in thinking about their own career paths and their own career trajectories. So this is great. Let's start with the questions, or the title of the webinar. Should I stay or should I go? How do we make that decision? And before we even get to how do we make that decision, I wanted to spend some time talking about why we're even asking that question. A few years ago, it sort of occurred to me, do people in other industries ask themselves that question, should I stay or should I go, or any variation of that? Is this something that happens sort of across professional environments, or is it specific to working in a legal setting? And I think the answer in part is that it is quite specific to practicing law. I don't know that someone in marketing or in nonprofit work or in finance is constantly asking themselves this question. They may be. I would be quite surprised if it was as readily and as prevalently as it is in a legal setting. I've been with my firm since 2005. I did my summer here in 2004, and in that time, countless people have asked the question either of me as part of their own career trajectory. I've overheard it. I've heard it when people have left. And I do think that there's some element of this notion that is unique to practicing law. And practicing law in a law firm, perhaps particularly, but generally in practicing law. And I say that sort of for two, I'll give sort of two quick anecdotes. One, I had a close colleague who left the firm, and when she transitioned to her clerkship, which she ended up taking a permanent clerkship, she said, I had forgotten that you can love your job. And I thought that was such an interesting thing. It stayed with me, that was the most pronounced thing for her when she transitioned, that people around her and that she herself suddenly felt that she loved her job. The other anecdote, I was recently invited to a luncheon for the ACLU, and there were a good number of ACLU attorneys who spoke about the work that they were doing, and you could tell that the way in which they were speaking, the passion with which they were speaking, indicated that they loved their job and that they derived meaning from their job, and that stayed with me as well. So I think there are variations of a legal practice that really do fulfill us and that don't engender this constant questioning about whether we should stay or go. I do believe that in other sort of segments of legal practice, we do find ourselves asking this question again and again. And this is in part because of billable hours, particularly in a law firm setting, whether you're in a small or a large firm. If you're billing your hours, that is a lot of pressure, and it is a daily measure, or seemingly a daily measure of your adequacy and your success. And when we fall short of a numerical measure, it feels like we are potentially not on the right path. So that I think that's one piece of it. The other piece is that practicing law is ripe for making mistakes. There are so many different ways in which you can make mistakes. And while our mistakes, perhaps unlike a physician or maybe some other profession, our mistakes are not often life or death type mistakes. They can be career influencing or career impacting, or could cause you to lose your job altogether, depending on the level of mistake. And the potential for mistakes in this profession are that big. So I think that pressure can weigh on us and can force us to revisit this question again and again. Should I stay or should I go? And the other thing that's quite tricky are the personalities that tend to lend themselves to working in a law firm or high pressure legal setting. People who gravitate toward that type of environment can sometimes be difficult to work with. So particularly as you are new in your career, you might find that the personalities, coupled with the potential for mistakes, coupled with billable hours if you are billing your hours, coupled with the pressures that come with a changing landscape. Our profession is changing, and we have gone from being more like academics in a sense, researching, analyzing, and answering nuanced legal questions, to entrepreneurship, running our own businesses in a sense, in that we have to bring in our own clients, whether you are at, with some exceptions, if you're in a firm or if you're running a solo practice or otherwise, you have that expectation of bringing in business. So all of those things combined can create a level of pressure and frankly, a level of dissatisfaction that triggers that question again and again. Should I stay or should I go? And so let's talk about how we answer that question. It's highly individual in one sense. On the other hand, because it is a question that is common, maybe not universal, but quite common in our industry, in our profession, and as it concerns law firm attorneys in particular, there are ways to think about it in a universal manner, even if ultimately it's an individualized question and analysis. So I'm going to answer this question with a good number of other questions, and I think by the end, hopefully, all of these questions will generate some answers, and we'll feel as though we're at the very least equipped to address whether we should stay or go, and how we make that decision in a way that we are confident we are doing correctly. I'm going to advance the slides here if I can, and if I can't, I may turn it over. All right, there we go. The first question that I like to ask myself and that I think about, and I should have said this at the outset, this is an ongoing inquiry. At no time, I've been practicing nearly 15 years now, at no time do I think this is a settled issue, or should it be a settled issue? Should I stay or should I go is something you should be asking yourself all the time, because we want to know that we are actively choosing our careers and actively generating meaning in our lives, by way of our careers. So I don't know that this is a question that we answer and move on. So these are the types of things that I think about on a regular basis, just to gauge if I'm happy with where I am or if something needs to shift. But the first thing that I think about is what my career will look like in the aggregate. It is not about today. It's certainly not about yesterday, and it's not about any given time period or time frame within your practice, in my view. A mentor of mine told me in recent years, and she's quite senior and has had a long career with 3 children and a practice that fluctuated quite a bit from kind of state-based work to federal work and back, and she's had to reinvent herself on a number of occasions. And she said to me, think about the fact that it is a long career. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so what do you need to do to make it to the end? What will you need to do on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis to make it to the end? And that's going to change day to day and month to month and year to year. So accommodate what you need in the moment and think about how that is just one piece of the larger puzzle. It is not the definition of what your career is going to look like. So I've taken that to heart, and I've thought quite a bit about how to incorporate that into daily challenges. If I am having a day or a week or a month that is incredibly trying, the question starts to linger in my mind, is this where I belong? Should I stay? Should I go? And then I revert to this. What does my career look like in the aggregate, and where does this fit in, this challenging month or challenging time? I'm saying months, but I've had periods of years where I've thought, if I continue to work with this particular opposing counsel, or if I have to stay engaged in this case that is causing me to lose sleep night after night after night, I won't make it. But what does this year or 2 years look like over the course of a 40-year career? It's just a blip. And I remind myself of that by looking at anecdotes of earlier years where I thought, oh my gosh, if I have to work with this partner one more day, I'm not going to make it. That partner is long gone. I've not seen or spoken with him or her for years and years and years. And it was just a blip. But in the moment, it felt like it was defining. So taking ourselves out of that mentality that any given case or deal or partner or opposing counsel or scenario or assistant, because sometimes it can come down to that, that any given situation that we are in the moment will not define your career. It will simply be, one piece of a larger and rich puzzle with personal, a robust personal life, interests, hobbies, a long and fully developed career. It will not be defining. Now, if it is, that tells you something. But it's very helpful to look at it in the aggregate. Will this matter in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5? If the answer is yes, this is something that I cannot tolerate for one more day, and it has changed everything about my career, that tells you something, and that is perhaps a signal that a shift needs to happen. But if you can see your way out of a trying situation, if you can see that in the aggregate, your career is actually great, your career has afforded you the opportunity to think intellectually, to work with brilliant people, to interact with clients and with colleagues and with partners and associates and business teams that you never would have otherwise met. If you have learned and progressed, if you can tell your children or your parents or your close friends and confidants that you are doing things that are meaningful, that is the narrative we are trying to build. And any one particular thing should not sort of shift you away from that, unless it is big enough and significant enough that it will impact the aggregate of your career. So I think this first question is quite helpful, and it always gives me sort of a moment of breathing room or meditation, just to say, oh, right, overall, the aggregate of the career has been good. And yes, this is a trying moment, but it is not a reason to go. So this question launches us into the others that I'll pose, because we can always fall back on this one and say, yes, this is a challenging career. Yes, I have to, make my hours. Yes, there's potential for mistakes, and I will make mistakes. No matter how senior and experienced I am, there will be mistakes made. Yes, there are challenging personalities. As an associate, you're dealing with personalities, perhaps of partners and others who are more senior to you. When you're a partner, you may be dealing with personalities at the management level. There will always be personalities. There will always be the expectation that you are staying busy, working hard, bringing in business, depending on what your firm or office looks like. But overall, we're going to get through those things, and we're going to reflect on and relish in the parts of the career that we love. And over time, on the whole, that's what we'll focus on. That's what we'll look back on. So this is why I start with this question, and I think it is the most enlightening as it concerns the broader theme of today. Should I stay or should I go? How do I stay the course? The course is a long one, and what does it look like in the aggregate? I will flip to the next one if I can. I may need a little help. There we go. Okay, the next question that I like to pose, and I have posed this question again and again and have answered the question, can I create meaning in my current position? A lot of the transition that I see in a law firm environment in particular comes down to a feeling of a lack of meaning. So colleagues of mine who have left the firm have often, whether they articulate it this way or not, indicate that they struggle to find meaning in the work that we do. And whether that is specific to an individual or specific to a law firm, I don't know that it matters for purposes of our discussion, because the idea here is that what is meaningful is individual. But we all want to walk away from our day, in the short term, and from our sort of careers in the long term, saying, I did something meaningful. Either it was meaningful externally or internally. I derived a lot of meaning from doing this work. We want to be able to say that. Without meaning, it is difficult to get up every day and do the best job that we can. And so this notion of creating meaning or having meaning, first and foremost, is a driver of success. What I've sort of reconciled about this is that before we leave, before we answer the question, should I stay or should I go, as the latter, I think I need to go, can you step back and find a way to create meaning in your current position? With all of the infrastructure in place that you have, is there something about your work or your office or where you are located that will enable you to create meaning without an entire shift of your professional world? Can you take a look at what is before you and find fulfillment and find the one seed of something that you like and build it into something big? And I'll give you a couple of examples, and I think you can extrapolate these, because this is something I've taken quite seriously in my own career and that I struggled with at the outset and then tried to solve. So I'll give you the first example. I spent, as you heard at the outset, I wrote a book in 2012 for law students and new lawyers about how to thrive in a legal setting. And the idea behind Thrive was to give sort of a step-by-step guide on finding success in the early years of your career. And I tried to focus on things that you might not learn in law school, those tangible, practical skills that oftentimes are defining in the course of someone's early career. as I started to write the book, I thought it would be useful to have classes and programs and training and coaching on these issues in addition to just a book. And so I told my firm, I want to take some time away. I want to finish this book and implement programs in law schools and firms across the country. And I did that. I spent a couple years away from the firm doing that. I had sort of throughout that time a nagging feeling that I left the firm prematurely. I left before I had made partner, and it felt that there was more to do in my career. I had a sort of lingering and deep sensation that I had left the firm prematurely. So I spent a couple of years teaching the book essentially, and was able to transition that to others who teach it. And I came back to the firm. But equally, when I came back, I thought, I'm going to miss teaching and doing professional development for law students and lawyers, because I do derive a lot of meaning from that work. So I came back to the firm with a clear goal of wanting to make partner and wanting to kind of integrate and have contribute to the ecosystem of the firm. But I wanted to continue doing professional development, and so without asking anyone, I didn't feel, and oftentimes, maybe to my own detriment, don't necessarily feel that permission is needed for things. I started to create programs for the associates in the Chicago office. And then that trickled out to programs for associates in Pittsburgh and other offices in the firm. And what ultimately came from that after years, I mean, this was in 2014 that I came back to the firm. And just this year, I was asked to step into the role, in addition to my full-time practice, was asked to step into the role of Director of Professional Development. And so I tell this story to give you a full picture of where, over time, I was able to chip away at roping something into my otherwise sort of traditional legal practice, this professional development piece of it, and I continued to add more and more and more until it was clear to the firm that actually I could handle both of these roles. And now a big part of my job is professional development, which I love and which I find a lot of meaning in doing, and particularly teaching others. So in a way, it's a particular anecdote because it's specific to my career and my interests, but the takeaway is that if you are engaged enough in something, interested enough in something, if you have passion for something that is outside of maybe the four corners of your traditional practice, try to figure out a way to foster that or grow it or make it compatible with your practice. The way that I encourage others to do this, sort of outside of the anecdote that I shared with you on the professional development side, is to build out a practice group that interests them. So if you are, part of perhaps a larger, more generic practice group, whether it's litigation-based or transactional-based, but you have a love for food, can you get into the food space or the food contamination space, or something that is of interest to you? If charity has always been of interest to you and doing nonprofit work, can you partner with a corporate client of the firm for a charitable initiative? You can get creative, and in an ideal scenario, your current position stays intact, this position where you have perhaps built up a little bit of capital, which we're going to talk about in a moment. You may be comfortable there. You have spent time. You know a lot of people there. Instead of disrupting that, can you create meaning where you are by way of incorporating something that you love or something that you're interested in or something that is compatible with your practice that you aren't yet doing a whole lot of? Can you build that out? And can you shift your career so that you stay, but you've internally made enough of a change that now on a day-to-day basis, and more importantly, at the end of this long career that we talked about, you will walk away knowing that you felt that what you were doing was meaningful. This question can sometimes change everything, because if you can stay, and this is the struggle. I don't know if I should stay or go. If somebody says to me, I know I have to go, again, because of perhaps something that we talked about on the last slide, something has happened that will make the aggregate unhealthy or dissatisfying, and so we know we must go. But if we're asking the question, should I stay or should I go, creating meaning, trying to create meaning in your current position is a really good medium, buys you a little bit of time to ensure that you are answering that question correctly in the aggregate of your career. If we could have the next slide, please. All right, this question, in a sense, is intuitive and organic and should be the question that we're asking. But I find sometimes that attorneys will leave, and particularly, again, will leave a law firm setting because of those pressures we talked about, without necessarily thinking about what the alternative path looks like, not the alternative career. Typically, people won't leave a job that they have without something else lined up. So they've thought about what the next job looks like, but have they thought about what the path down the line looks like? And this is something that must be worked out in every instance before you can answer the question, should I stay or should I go? Presumably, if you're asking yourself this question, you have a sense that staying is an option. You know what it's going to look like if you stay. What will it look like if you go? And not just in the sense of, what does this job look like? What is the job description? But what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? How will your life be relative to how it is now? And then again, that fundamental question, what is your career going to look like in the aggregate? And I should clarify that it may well be the right answer to go, but we're asking all of these questions so that we can get there. And I said that this is sort of a living, breathing question that you ask yourself all the time. If you do go, we should continue to ask the question, because sometimes career transitions are the only healthy way to build that aggregate of a career that has meaning, that makes sense for you and for your life. But we want to be looking forward. We want to be thinking about this in the aggregate. This alternative career path question is a critical one for me, because what I have seen, as I said, is that attorneys will transition, and particularly out of a law firm and into some other job. It's not often an entirely different career, but sometimes it is, where when they get there, they realize that the things that were challenging about firm life still present themselves, maybe in different forms, but are certainly still there. And some of the other parts of their careers that were, vibrant and healthy and strong have now been compromised. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but I wanted to give a little bit of a backdrop. So if we're asking the question, should I stay or should I go? This is an important one. What does the path forward look like? If I transition to an in-house counsel role, will I have the same flexibility that I have in a law firm or as a solo practitioner? Will I have the same benefits? Will I have the same, and I don't just mean sort of the tangible kind of, medical benefits and employee benefits, but will I have the benefit of being surrounded by others who are intellectually curious as I am, or interested in the nuances of the law, right? You sort of have to fill in that blank for yourself as it concerns what you like about your current scenario. If you transition, will you have those same elements? What will you be foregoing? And what will that day-to-day look like? When you shift, what is that aggregate career going to look like? What path forward do you have? Do you have an opportunity, for example, to transition to the business side if you go into a corporate setting? And is that something that interests you, or will you find yourself sort of hitting a dead end because that isn't a transition that you want to make? Investigate the path and this notion of, what it will look like going forward so that you can compare. You can compare what you know, you can compare what your day-to-day looks like where you are with the alternative path, and then make a decision on balance as to what those two things look like, and what you will be sacrificing and what you will be gaining. There's certainly always the possibility that there will be something to gain from making a transition, but we must do that analysis and feel comfortable that before we take any sort of leap, we have complete transparency and clarity as to the path, that long-term proposition going forward in whatever role that we have. So this is an important question so that we don't prematurely kind of leave something behind before we've thought about, again, not just what the job is, not just the job description, but what our entire trajectory going forward is going to look like. Next slide, please. All right, this question comes to mind because it goes hand in hand with the last question that we asked. What does that path look like going forward, and what are we foregoing? When we were creating the slides, I said we have to emphasize the word here. Who am I here? Who am I in my current role? Who am I in my firm? What role or roles do I play? What do people think of me? And what have I done to earn that reputation? Now, at the expense of peppering the entire presentation with questions, which I actually don't mean to do, but these are the types of hard questions we need to be asking ourselves. And let me explain why. This one is near and dear to me for a couple of reasons. There is something quite unique about developing relationships with people over time in a law firm setting, and in any sort of legal setting where we are in sort of close quarters, if not physically, sort of theoretically and mentally in close quarters with people, thinking about hard issues, solving client problems, staying up late to close a deal or file a brief, and those types of relationship building exercises that are sort of tangential to, related to, or sort of an ancillary benefit of doing the work are created over time and are difficult to replicate. So relationship building, one, if you are in a position where you have spent time and you have earned the relationships that you have, there is a lot of value, that's currency, that you may not want to give up necessarily simply because today or this year or the last couple of years have been trying. So think about who you are in your firm, and did you get there because of relationship building, one. Two, what else have you done to earn your reputation? Have you done great work over time, and do people know you for having done great work? Have you participated in associate recruiting? Are you part of the infrastructure of the hiring? So, are at least some of the people in your environment people that you personally have hand selected or weighed in on in terms of whether they would be successful in the firm? Are people relying on you because you are a woman or a person of color or bring some other diverse perspective to the table? Are there people coming up the ranks behind you who are counting on you to stay? Now, we can never make career decisions based on others, but we can make career decisions based on our own accountability to others, whether it's direct accountability or indirect. Who are you in your current environment? And I would articulate it. I would write down every single thing that you add, whether it is a legal skill that nobody else has, whether it's something more intangible like the things we just talked about. How much value does that provide for the firm, one? And two, how much currency is that you're leaving on the table if you go? Now, it's not to say that you can't replicate that. You certainly can, and we all can. But when you quantify it, you can also quantify sort of in parallel how much you will be giving up, or how much effort you will have to put in to recreate that somewhere else. And again, sometimes it warrants it, but not always. And simply by articulating the value, articulating our own value, putting it down on paper, all of the things that we have done over time to integrate and to become constructive and productive members of our current environments, just seeing that on paper reminds you that there is so much value in you, that you are so valuable, and that you can leverage that and foster that and continue to build on it and get to where you need to be. So part of this analysis of, who am I here, is calculating all of these things that you have done to contribute, and then thinking about how you can build on those things, creating tangible goals and action items that will make those things, essentially, build upon themselves, or have sort of a snowball effect that will get you out of whatever sort of down space that you're in, that is forcing you to ask that bigger question of whether you should go. Should you stay the course? Can you make it in this firm? Yes, you can. And you will see that when you add up your value and think about how you can only build on that. If you choose not to stay the course, it's a viable option, but you are certainly, at least in a typical scenario, starting over as it concerns that external value that people have seen, that they can reference, that they can rely upon, and that they come to you for. So thinking about who you are, articulating it, making it tangible, and then thinking about how you can build on it, what goals you can set in motion to sort of capitalize on this value. It moves us out of the headspace of, how do I possibly stay the course in a firm, and into the headspace of, wow, I have so much momentum, I have done so much, how could I possibly go? There are people looking up to me, there are people looking to me as a peer, there are people ahead of me thinking I am the next person to take over their book of business, or that they can, trust with their clients. Those are critical things with value and currency that we don't necessarily want to leave on the table, and we want to shift our mindset into thinking about that instead of, I can't possibly stay the course. Next slide, please. All right, this last question, I think a lot of times when we start to contemplate what's next in our careers, we revert to thinking about happiness. Like, I'm just not happy here. And I think many of us on the line, and certainly I can attest to this, have felt at times that their happiness is being compromised because of their work, whether it means, their work in the short term or their work in the long time. My happiness is being compromised. Life is far too short, and the practice of law is just a job in the end. It's a great career, it's a great profession, but it is just a job. We cannot sacrifice our own happiness. We must put ourselves first. We must think about whether we're happy and tend to that and nurture it. When I say kind of, am I happy, there's a lot more behind that, right? Am I healthy? Am I well? Am I satisfied? There are a lot of other ways to think about happiness, but I'm using that as sort of the short form of, am I content? Does this work for me? So it is important that we ask ourselves this question, and that the answer in the aggregate is yes. But I put a parenthetical in here because it's something that I've seen time and time again. Am I happy relative to who I am? In other words, am I struggling with my happiness, my contentment, my level of satisfaction because of my environment, or am I going to leave here? Am I going to say, you know what, law firm life is not for me, for example, and I'm going to do something completely different? And in 6 months, am I going to find that my level of happiness and satisfaction and overall wellness is the same because this is my baseline? And if the answer is this is my baseline, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. We are who we are, and we can. I'll say in a moment that I think there's room to expand this, but let's be sensitive to who we are. Let's be aware, have that sort of personal self-awareness as to kind of our baseline level of contentment in any scenario we've been in, and work from there. Because what we don't want to do is make a decision that is not based on the aggregate of our careers, that does not take into account whether we can find meaning somehow, whether we can create meaning somehow, that does not take into account all of the currency that we've built up over the course of our time in the firm, and make this decision on the basis that we feel that we are dissatisfied and not content, when in fact this is something internal and not specific to the work at all. So let's ask ourselves this question and force a hard and truthful and authentic answer about kind of what our baseline is. And then, much like creating meaning, can we work on that? Can we stay where we are? Can we not disrupt? Can we keep all of our currency? Can we rely on, or can we ensure that others can rely on us, who are looking up to us? Can, the more senior attorneys that we work with rely on us to stay? And can we work instead internally on building up that level of happiness by looking at things like what our personal life is like, and if we can bolster that in some way to kind of change the happiness and wellness calculus? Can we look to those things that create meaning and sort of focus on those to generate further happiness? Can we foster happiness internally without creating disruption that isn't going to go to happiness in the long run? I like and appreciate that when people are considering whether to leave a law firm environment, they think about this, right? As I said at the outset, our wellness is the most important thing. Our happiness is the most important thing. But let's not make decisions on the sort of mistaken idea that we will be happier somewhere else unless we can answer that question in a way that we know that we will be. I am miserable here. I have been miserable here from day one. There is nothing I can do to change that. I've shifted things. I've tried to create meaning. I've worked on things that I love. I've worked with partners that I love, and still, this is not for me. That says something. If instead you're saying, well, I tend to be the kind of person who's not always satisfied. I'm always searching for something more. I often, just by way of personality, feel like things could be better, and I'm striving for more, and I'm a type A personality, and I want to get and have more. Great. Let's work on feeling satisfied when it is appropriate to, and when you've earned it. But let's do it here. Let's stay the course. Let's find a way to bolster how you are feeling with everything else that is already in place, all the infrastructure. Let's use the tools of asking these questions, creating meaning, calculating our value, and building on that for a snowball effect, and then revisit how we feel internally about our day-to-day lives, our lives in the aggregate, relative to who we are. With that, I've asked a lot of questions, so I wanted to give the opportunity to open up the questions. And this is, while it's a webinar and it feels a little one-sided in that I'm speaking into a phone and I can't see who's on the phone, it would be ideal to make this a dialogue. So I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have that are specific to your practice or that are hypothetical, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm happy to turn this into a dialogue and kind of share back and forth with you. So please, feel free to ask any questions that come to mind.
Sure. We have a question right now from one of the attendees, and the question has to do with perceived failure. How do you overcome a perceived failure when you're just starting out your career?
This is a great question. And I will tell you, so the word failure is very interesting. One, I think we need to shift away from failure, because making a mistake is one thing, and we will all make mistakes. I recall early on when I had written my book, I was kind of interviewing senior attorneys, and I said, when do you get to a point where you have mastered your career? And this was an attorney who was probably well into his 70s, and he sort of laughed, and he said, never. Like, as if that was an impossibility. And that gave me, speaking of breathing room, that gave me a lot of breathing room, as it should for all of you. We will never be in a position where we are not going to make some mistakes here and there. So failure is not on the table. Even if you decide, you know what, I'm leaving the law entirely and I'm walking out of the office and I'm never coming back, that's not a failure. It's a decision. And we are all entitled to decisions that make our lives better and that are right for us. So I would hope for whomever asked the question that word failure doesn't come to mind again, because there's really no way to fail. There are ways to make mistakes. And the best thing that you can do in the face of a mistake is own the mistake, responsibly handle the mistake, whether that means going to a partner that you're working with and saying, I made a mistake, this is what happened, and this is how I propose, if you agree, to fix it, and your fix is impeccable, and you acknowledge that you are sorry and will never make the mistake again. That goes a long way to and speaks of your character. So again, no one will anticipate that you're not going to make any mistakes, that you're not going to stumble, but the way that you deal with the mistake is absolutely defining and will say a lot about who you are. So handling it boldly, handling it in a forthcoming manner, and rectifying it are key. And the other thing that I like to do and did for years and years, and in fact, this in part formed the basis of Thrive, I would then make a note to myself of the mistake. I would just jot down, something, remember to attach exhibits, or, whatever it might have been that you didn't do, and keep sort of a running list readily available, because the last thing you want to do is make the same mistake again. So again, a mistake is okay, it's expected. Owning up to the mistake and fixing it will be very well received. Making the same mistake again, there will be less leeway for that. So I kept that list, and I would just reference it every once in a while and just like, oh, right, okay, now I'm good on all of these things. I'm going to make other mistakes, but I'm not going to make these. So that's how I would handle a mistake. I would certainly not describe it as a failure. We have never failed. And this is not the type of career where you should portray yourself as someone who has failed. You have simply made a mistake. You've apologized. You've owned up to it. You've fixed it, and you've jotted it down so that you won't do it again.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight. And thank you, Desiree, for your time and insights. And we want to thank everyone for attending today's program. We do have a number of upcoming programs, so we hope that you will join us. Mark your calendar for these upcoming career development programs. And we also have some career choice series programs coming up. The series is designed to give you a brief overview of a specific practice area. And then for more information and updates, you can connect with us on social media. And lastly, be sure to check out our leadership page on our website to learn more about who helps programs like this possible. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.